Hi, everyone. Welcome to RedMonk Conversations. I'm Rachel Stevens. I'm a senior analyst with RedMonk, and I'm excited to have with me today Dexter Horthy from Replicated. Dexter, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hey, thanks, Rachel. So I'm Dexter. I am the VP of Customer Engineering at Replicated, which is essentially all of the engineers on our team who work directly with our customers and to some extent also with their customers. And today I'm super excited to talk about how we're seeing people, apply DevOps principles when they're distributing their application into other people's infrastructure, especially into Kubernetes infrastructure, and talk about the challenges and what we're seeing and where we see everything going.
Excellent. And I think we'll dive in a little bit about what Replicated specifically does in this space. But overall, what we're going to be talking about today is just the general challenges that companies face in trying to deliver software into heterogeneous environments. And in particular, how you can use Kubernetes to help aid that process. And I think Kubernetes for a lot of people can be a little bit of an intimidating technology in and of itself. It's not necessarily the easiest to get configured and working correctly. But what Replicated has found is that you can use the power of Kubernetes to help people get software on-prem into various different customer environments. So that's what we're going to dive in today to talk about just how that works and what the pain points are and how customers can use Replicated and tools like it to kind of understand the software environment a little bit better. Okay, so let's dive in. Now that's kind of where we're going, the roadmap. But I think it's probably best to level set a little bit and kind of talk about just the cultural things that have shaped where we are in the industry today. And I think we as an industry have really done a good job recognizing that the culture that we build within our teams and the tools and practices that we use all kind of feed into one another. And I think the epitome of this is when the industry started to embrace and adopt DevOps. And that's been a decade-long journey for a lot of companies. Some companies are maybe a little bit newer to it. But as an industry, we've been working for a long time and figuring out how can we break down these silos between teams. And we have this distinct set of skills. And for a long time, we had this process of devs do this and ops do this and things get thrown over the wall. And then we realized that there was this big disconnect between what everyone was doing and people didn't have this shared understanding of pain points and we didn't have a shared sense of ownership. And so we created a culture of DevOps where we can start to have these skills blend together and we have a shared understanding of what the common pain points are. And what I want you to talk to me about, Dexter, is Replicated's thesis, where there's maybe another cultural barrier that you've identified in the market around delivering software. So can you maybe start by just walking me through how you see the market?
Yeah, totally. So I mean, I really think at the core of it is the same sort of cultural rift is emerging as customer hosted software is making a comeback. But in these days, the wall is, we have dev and ops all working together nicely, getting along, 20 years after all of this, hopefully, but then you have this whole other group of people that becomes super necessary in delivering software in this way, where you're not running it as a SaaS, but you're delivering it into a customer environment in success, in sales, in support, in services. And a lot of these folks I talk to are still living in a world where they receive something over the wall and they take it to the customer and they are doing that hero work and they do whatever it takes to get it up and running. And we did a survey where we were working with some of these folks in the field and doing some training and sort of teaching on some of the tools that Replicated provides for supposedly making that easier. And the feedback I got was, again, we just get the thing and we take it on site and we get it up and running. And that's our job. Why are you teaching us to modify the application itself to make it easier to support, to make it easier to deliver? So you see there's this new wall emerging, or at least that's how I've observed it, is talking to lots and lots of different teams who do this, where, just because dev and ops are working well together doesn't mean we've broken down all the silos in our org, and doesn't mean there's not even more room for improvement in how we deliver software.
Gotcha. And so the persona that you're seeing typically siloed, is that typically like a field engineer or customer success? Is that typically the persona that's still in that pain point?
It's interesting. It's super blurry, right? Because every single company tackles this differently. And it's always, whenever you have, this problem is really sticky, let's throw people at it. sometimes they're called solutions architects, sometimes they're called sales engineers, sometimes they're called field engineers. So it's interesting. I like to use the phrase field engineering as that broad category, but I know that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people.
Gotcha. No, but I think that generally paints the picture pretty well. One of the things I wanted to dig into a little bit, though, is one of the phrases you used there, which was that customer hosted software making a comeback. I think that's interesting because I think a lot of the times in the industry, especially as someone who's kind of an in observer of the industry as an analyst, we see a lot of push towards cloud. And so I just wanted to push back a little bit in terms of what you actually mean by that term. And you might have some discussion there.
Yeah, it's interesting because the terminology is this like, okay, on-prem versus cloud. And so most of the market IT spend is still in non-cloud. But like where we're seeing this is it's less about whether it's running a physical data somewhere that someone owns or a colo versus AWS, Azure, GCP, whatever, one of these major cloud providers. It's more about who controls the data. It's about security and data privacy, and sometimes even cost. But this idea of rather than the SaaS model where I, as a consumer of an application, send my data up to the app and the vendor becomes the steward of my data, it's this swing back to this model where, this was in the 90s, you would get a DVD and you would install the software in your server rack. And that model of bringing the application to where the data is our thesis at Replicated, at least, is that we're boomeranging back from this multi-tenant SaaS model to it may be running in the cloud, but it's running in the customer's cloud, not in the cloud of the team who actually built it and wrote the application.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
I think so. So are you talking then maybe like the sovereign cloud concerns if you have data governance concerns, or maybe private clouds if you have just security concerns? Is that the kind of shift that you're talking about?
Exactly. Is as every year Kubernetes makes it easier, makes applications more portable, more repeatable, and kind of moves them more towards autopilot. And every year we have bigger and more severe data breaches where basically smaller and smaller companies are able to switch the way they consume software from consuming it as a SaaS where their data is out there and whoever vendors they work with become part of their attack surface area, right? That vendor gets compromised, their data is at risk to, okay, we want to bring this in-house, even though we're not one of these giant enterprises, Fortune 100 or whatever. So the barrier to entry of bringing the app to where the data is, it seems like it's getting, that's our thesis, that it's continuing to get lower and lower every year, and more people are going to want to consume tools in that way.
Interesting. I think there are some in the industry who might kind of consider that like an iconoclastic viewpoint, but I do see that there are definitely reasons to run things not in the cloud. I think one of the things that we see at RedMonk is that there's a drive for managed services for a lot of companies, that just kind of this desire for lower overhead and kind of a desire for being able to shift operational burden. But at the same time, it is exactly what you're saying, where we also see this. There are external pressures in terms of especially data sovereignty, things like that, where people are like, okay, I have to figure out how to manage portions of my IT estate in different ways. And what that means is that you have a lot of fractured architectures that are sitting all over the place.
Right. And like one of my favorite examples is there was this breach that happened a long time ago, at least 3 or 4 years ago. But hackers broke into the infrastructure of a well-known CI/CD company because they knew that one of this company's customers was a crypto exchange. And so they said, okay, we'll break into the hosting provider, we'll get some source code credentials, and then we'll be able to get into the crypto exchange and, get some Bitcoins and go on vacation, whatever. And turns out that even though it was kind of public case study that this exchange was a customer of the CI platform, the exchange was completely safe because they were running that CI/CD platform in their own data center. It wasn't on-prem, it was in AWS, but it was in their AWS. So they had removed, even though the vendor was compromised, they'd remove that vendor from their attack surface area.
So I think now's maybe a good time to talk a little bit about Replicated's go-to-market motion, because I think it can be helpful to understand. So the way that I kind of mentally slot Replicated is that you help SaaS vendors take their products to people who want to operate in their own environments. That might be overly simplistic, though. Can you maybe just pitch what Replicated does at a high level for everyone?
Totally. I mean, that's a huge part of it. And that was kind of how the company was originally founded, is, hey, you are building a SaaS application. You have your whole platform, you have your whole pipeline. Wouldn't it be great if you could, add one line to your CI/CD system, and now you have a package that can be run in any environment, not just a SaaS that you host, but you get a package that will run in an air-gapped data center that is, a underground bunker somewhere, to someone else's AWS VPC, to kind of everything in between, Colo, vSphere, whatever it is. We found a lot of success as well working with folks who have been doing that for 15 years. It's not just SaaS companies who are looking to expand their market to more people, but it's also kind of larger, more established companies who have been delivering software in this way since 20 years ago, before SaaS was a really big model, or delivering tools that just don't make sense as SaaS. But now they're looking to modernize. Now they're looking to move to Kubernetes, and they know they have teams of 5, 10, 15, 40 people who work on the distribution layer of their application and say, oh, we're going to have to rebuild all of this to Kubernetes, spend 2 years doing that, and keep the whole kind of original thing up to date and shipping and patched and with security updates. And they say, okay, how can we reduce the build versus buy costs? How can we accelerate this transition so we can unlock all those benefits of using containers in Kubernetes, as far as, developer productivity and auto scalability and all of that stuff. That's kind of where we're trying to. So this is two main use cases.
Gotcha. Now, okay, so I think what we've talked about so far, so we talked about kind of the cultural gaps that have led it to be challenging to to deliver to these heterogeneous environments. We talked about the variety of environments that you try to target in terms of air gap to a VPC to a colo, like all over the place. And those are going to have different requirements in terms of how you actually can deliver the software. But so there's the cultural pain, there's maybe just the physical pain, but what other pain points does Replicated see in this environment in terms of how to be able to do this? Let's just maybe talk about what's different about this landscape versus being able to deliver something as like a pure SaaS.
I love this question. And it really actually comes back to our beginning, kind of our cultural stuff. Of part of, I think, what caused this kind of Cambrian explosion of DevOps tools and practices and capabilities was the idea of kind of what the Dora team unlocked, which is things like, okay, fast cycles, short lead times, people deploying 100 times a day, and you just simply can't do that in a world where you're delivering into somebody else's environment, because part of what they want is control. And so we see the highest performers in the market are deploying once a month. Most of their customers are upgrading on that cadence. Some people ship once a week, but they don't actually expect anybody to update more than once a month. So one of these challenges is slower release cycles. If you're used to shipping 50 times a day, now you got to figure out how to harden a release so that it can go out, and you're not going to be able to patch it easily for another week or 2 weeks or month or whatever it is. I mean, obviously people do emergency stuff, but it's a big lift to roll this out to all the customer base. And then you end up with lots of different versions of the application deployed at once. And so if you're trying to support different folks on different versions, it's not like hosting a SaaS site where you press deploy and people reload the web page and everyone's on the newest version.
Yeah, that's definitely a different go-to-market muscle for a lot of these companies in terms of just not only the tools you need, but just the approach that you need.
Right. And then you're supporting 100 different environments of different operating systems and different clusters and different data centers and different networking setups, and kind of especially if you start shipping into the Fortune 100 or Global 2000, you end up with these very, very customized security setups and networking setups that it makes support really, really difficult, and it makes it really hard to isolate kind of environmental issues from issues with the application itself to issues with how the end user has configured it. And we tend to solve this with the human element, right? We tend to, again, we throw people into the mix. We have, it turns out that if you have a lot of really smart support engineers, field engineers, success engineers, professional services, sometimes you can solve this problem, but it's very labor intensive, right? It can be anywhere from 2 hours to 2 weeks to 2 months to get a new install up and running, to get an upgrade completed, especially in these highly secured environments. Teams end up building these kind of hacked together piles of tools to gather diagnostic info. And so this whole problem just ends up being fairly painful, and people end up doing it because the upside in the market of delivering these, enterprises want software delivered in a very secure way, but they're also willing to pay for it, which is where it kind of, why, you'd say, why would you go through all of this when you could just do SaaS? And the answer is, well, the biggest portion of the market, right? There was some study, it was 80% of enterprise software spend is still non-SaaS purchases. And so if you go all SaaS, it's moving that way, and we have this thesis that it's going to boomerang back eventually. But if you eliminate that part, then you're cutting yourself out of a large part of the market.
Right, that makes sense. So I definitely see these pain points being validated in the market in terms of just where people struggle. Can you talk to me a little bit about the replicated way of doing things versus the pain point intensive way?
It's and I think one thing our CEO loves to say is, we're not the easy button, but we take a really, really, really hard problem and we try to make it significantly easier. And this is kind of, again, there's a software portion and there's a culture portion, right? It's, how do we tackle these problems with software? How do we reduce the need for humans? How do we make their lives better and easier when they are needed? And the same questions we were answering in the SaaS world. How do I release more quickly? How do I reduce my change fail rate? How do I improve my time to recovery? It's been really interesting to see how folks are kind of embracing these same DevOps principles when distributing into customer environments. It feels like it's a little bit behind the full embrace of DevOps for SaaS environments. But it's been really fun to work with folks and see how people are solving these problems, bring a lot of creativity to the table. And, our products are designed to help with this, but it's a very unique problem for every single person who's solving it. But that's the journey we're on. It's been a lot of fun so far.
Yeah. And then one just kind of slightly technical question, but I think a lot of the times when we think Kubernetes, we say, oh, great, that makes things portable. One thing that we might also think when we think Kubernetes is to go, oh, that might not exist in a lot of really established enterprise on-prem environments yet. That might not be the cutting edge. Right. We have Kubernetes distributions places yet. Does a customer site have to have Kubernetes in order for them to use replicated?
Not even for them to use replicated, right? There's 100 versions of what we would describe as kind of embedded Kubernetes, which is this, I would almost describe it more as a technique than a technology, but the idea of, hey, some of my customers will have Kubernetes. I'm going to give them a Kubernetes-based artifact, Helm chart or something like that. And then some of them won't have Kubernetes, but most people can get you a couple VMs or a couple servers. And so that's the idea of bundling into whatever package you build or buy, but bundling in the Kubernetes layer itself so that, you can bootstrap or, customer runs a script, and part of what happens as the application is installed is a single purpose, call it embedded Kubernetes cluster, not necessarily embedded in terms of embedded devices or embedded Linux, but it becomes a part of the app, and it's kind of the same as the app, right? The app is the cluster and the cluster is the app. You're not delivering a general use Kubernetes cluster. So we have a solution that does that. We call curl with a K. But there's a lot of interesting options. And so what's really, I think, revolutionary here is not really any particular one tool, but the technique of saying, hey, even if our customers don't have Kubernetes, we're going to ship that into their environment, and we're going to help make sure that stays up and treat it as a piece of our application.
And then I just want to make sure I'm summarizing kind of my understanding of replicated correctly. So a little bit, it's a two-sided market. Is that right? So you have the software vendors who are coming to you to help them package their software in an easy to consume way. And then you also have the customers that you are sending the packaged software to into their environments. Is that a fair way to just kind of summarize top level how all of these parties are interacting?
That's a good question, and it's not totally clear, and it's evolved a lot. I mean, at the core of it, we build a product that becomes part of our customer's product, which they go distribute to their customers. So we don't generally have direct relationships with those kind of end users who are doing the install, but at the core of it, those are our customers, and we are dedicated. We have whole product teams dedicated to making sure that experience for the end user, for the enterprise, is really, really, really good, whether it's fixing things when stuff goes wrong or making that kind of initial unboxing experience really, really delightful.
So it's not to think of Replicated as a middleman between a vendor and a client, but rather to think of Replicated as something that can augment a vendor's software in a way that makes it easier for the client to consume.
Exactly. And everything that gets bundled with is totally open source. We love giving back to the community. We're contributors to kind of ancillary products and projects in the Kubernetes world, like Kustomize and a few others. So we're very into this idea of like, we'll build really good components. You take them and use them in your app. And if that's really good, then we're going to get adoption, and we're going to help the world solve this problem in what we really think is a safer and more secure way to deliver and consume software.
All right. So if I were just kind of to summarize what we came up with in this video, I think where I would go is that we talked about the overall size of the addressable market for these on-prem environments is substantial. And I think we both agreed that there's just a significant opportunity that exists for companies to be able to sell into these legacy enterprise environments. And if you're selling only into a SaaS environment or only into public cloud environment, you're really limiting the places in which you can do business. And so what we're talking about here then is understanding what are the pain points for delivering in these businesses. And some of these are cultural pain points, like we talked about at the beginning, in terms of the field engineering teams versus the DevOps teams, in terms of being able to update all of these pieces of software. We have tool challenges, and we have environment challenges in terms of all these heterogeneous environments, and all of that comes together. I mean, it's a big opportunity, but it's also a space that's really hard to address well. And so that is the space that Replicated is playing in. And so that's my high level summary. Did I get it right?
I think that's I couldn't have said it better myself. Yep. It's what are the people and processes and tools that are going to help us unlock the value here, and how quickly can we kind of shift the conversation and shift how we're doing business to do that.
Excellent. Well, Dexter, thank you so much for coming and chatting with me. It's been really enjoyable, and I appreciate you taking the time.
Rachel, this has been a blast. Thank you so much.
Thanks.